Hello and welcome to Sensei podcast. This is Manos Brilakis discussing with leaders in the field of CTO and complex PCI. Sensei means teacher or master in Japanese. The goal of the Sensei podcast is to help you learn and improve in CTO and complex PCI so that you can become the best that you can be and offer your patients the best possible results. Hello everyone and welcome to Sensei podcast. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Dr. Bilal Murad, who directs the CTO program at the United Hospital, a great partner, great friend, great CTO operator over many years. So Bilal, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you
today.
for having me. I appreciate the time, opportunity.
And we'll be working for so long together, but still, I don't think I even know myself how you started all this. It was before, moved to Minneapolis, doing this for a long time. How did you get into the complex CTO PCI interventions?
It's interesting. When I was initially in medical school, actually I should say journey began even before that. I always wanted to go into medicine. And my initial thought was, I'm the kind of a person who really wants to be more of a family physician sort of an approach. The thought of an invasive, aggressive approach was just not part of my personality. I was a little bit more of an introvert. People knew me as a very quiet person who was kind of shy and going for other people and speaking. So when I went to med school, and there was no real cardiology at the time back in the late 1980s in Pakistan, where I grew up and went to med school. So, however, when I graduated, I wanted to get into the field of cardiovascular medicine through the exposure that I'd had. So then I did my electives and in pediatric cardiology at UCLA, graduated from medical school, and spent about 4 or 5 months with Dr. DeBakey and Dr. Gerald because my initial thought was I wanted to go into cardiac surgery. But as a foreign medical graduate, it was incredibly difficult in those days. So anyway, I ended up in medicine, and very quickly I had Tim Henry assigned as my advisor, and ended up in cardiology. My first job at the Minneapolis VA actually was probably what really set the tone for me. It was incredibly complex population, as you know, having worked at the VA, and I was the only full-time operator. So I had to do pretty much everything, and working 6-7 long-hour cases with no support in those days with the equipment we had was a tough challenge. And so I started doing CTOs at that time with wire-based techniques, and then came around the front runner device, if you remember.
Yes.
And I had somehow that device worked well for me. I had a lot of success with it, and I really found that to be an area where this is something I really want to get into. So then, of course, the device got pulled off, and then I ended up when the Stingray crossbus the whole hybrid protocol took over. That's when I started back in 2013, and that's a whole interesting story of how I got into it.
So then I realized we have common roots because I was in Dallas VA for a long time, and that's exactly where also because so many patients with complex lesions, that's where also you find the need and the inspiration to do these procedures. So did you learn by yourself? Did you have other people come in the lab and help you out? How did you actually learn all the techniques, or was it from the manufacturers? Chad Kugler and the whole Bridgepoint group.
Yes. So when I remember my first conversation with Richard Rice, and Richard, I heard about this cool device, and he happened to be in Minneapolis. We met, and I said, Richard, I've done a lot of CTOs, and I would love to get into this. And Richard said, I can't give you the crossbars until you attended a meeting. And of course, in my naive thought process, not having a clue of what the hybrid protocol was, I'm like, come on, Richard, I've done so many CTOs with wires and with front runner. Do I really need to go for a training? He goes, you absolutely have to go. You will realize that's a whole different field. And so I kind of reluctantly went. And I will tell you that experience totally changed my perspective. It was a life-changing, career-changing moment for me. I actually went to Mahi, and it was a phenomenal conference with Tony, Mike, Bill, and Aaron, and I don't remember if you were there. I don't think you were there for the first one. And then, because I think you and I met later in Chicago for the first time. So that's when I went, and I was blown away in those 2 days, just looking at the approach and the skill set and the depth of the intellect that was required, and the patience, and the impact that they were making, right? So that totally changed my approach. And I was already into complex PCI to a great degree, but that sort of took me to a whole different level. And I think I adapted it very quickly. So when I then started the program, I had one of my favorite stories is my first proctor actually was Cal. And it was December of 2013. And Cal was supposed to come to me, and he was proctoring someone in Sioux Falls. And he was supposed to be coming to Minneapolis the next day, that same evening on a flight. And there was a winter storm. And it was like all the flights were shut off. There was like a foot of snow outside on the ground. And Cal called me and said, I'm still coming. And he drove all the way from Sioux Falls, ended up in Minneapolis at 2 o'clock in the morning, showed up at United Hospital at 7 o'clock in the morning, just so he could proctor me. And I'm like, these guys are dedicated. This is unbelievable. And of course, he was phenomenal in what he did. And then later on, Aaron Grantham came in. And we had Dr. Parag Doshi come in. Nick Burke actually helped me as well. So those 4 guys first came to the lab and taught me. And after Aaron came, he sat down with me and said, okay, this is it. What do you need to do to move to the next level? And so then he was very kind. He actually invited me as a faculty at Mahi 2 years later. And at the same time, Bill and Aaron also called me over for the first master's course that they did, which was for the, if you've done half the first 50 CTOs. So, and then of course I met everybody at the hybrid CTO club in Chicago. That's where we first met. So I think that whole journey was so critical for me to get exposed to these individuals who had such skill sets and such brilliance in them. I look up to them to this day, all of you, including you, obviously. And just that has really carried me a long way. And of course, over the years, I'll tell you, I have had difficult cases where I've been able to reach out to individuals. I've called you in the middle of the day. I've reached out to Bill and Aaron, done FaceTiming with them if I ever needed help. And Simon Walsh, I called him one time, and it was actually about 8 o'clock in the night, and it was St. Patrick's Day. And he called me, and he answered the phone, and he said, Bilal, what are you doing calling an Irish guy and it's on St. Patrick's Day at 7 o'clock in the night? So, and one time I was in Pakistan, and I was doing some proctoring, and I needed some help. So I actually ended up calling Jim Spratt. So my point just is that this community has been so supportive that anytime you need assistance, people are there to help you. And that, I think, really makes you feel that even in those dark moments when you're really struggling, you always know at the back of your mind there's somebody who can help you. And I think that's really what's carried me through.
Well, and clearly, I mean, you take it to a new level with very complex cases and epicardials and you name it. But many people got exposed to the same courses, but I would say only 1 out of 10 actually moved on to create a strong independent CTO program. So what was it that made you be successful setting up to where, many people, even very good operators, just don't want to carry on?
Correct. I've thought about that. I will always remember Min Vo and I were talking about this once many years ago, and he said, we really should do some kind of a psychological testing on our CT operators and see what is it about our personalities that wants it. I guess for me personally, I've always been somebody who is very meticulous, and one thing that is that I enjoy the struggle to excellence. So I'm not here competing with anybody. The question really is that if God has gifted me with anything, how do I utilize that to the best of my abilities to benefit somebody else? So if I have a skill set in this area, what is my purpose? Is it just sort of doing cases that anybody else can do? Or should I take it to a level where 2 things. 1, I can do things that nobody else wants to do, because I believe people have the skills to do it. It really is a matter of temperament. And so I found that I was able to dig deep into myself to find that resilience and that patience, and as Bill and Aaron always say, and you have said as well, that feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And so dealing with that stress, and so I found myself being able to, when I'm in a difficult situation like that, where I have to be creative with my thought process, I don't panic, but I kind of go into a zone. And that being in that zone really helps me. It helped me to focus and try and problem solve. And I don't always have the solution, obviously. I don't have the success rates as some of the other guys do. But I sort of thrive on that. and I look back and I reflect on what I could. Sometimes I can't sleep at night sometimes if I have a complication or if I have an unsuccessful procedure, because then I think in my mind, how do I do it? So that sort of is a fuel for me. Doesn't deter me. So I think that's bottom line is I want to excel in what I'm doing, and I think that's what drove me. It's never been about volume for me. It's always been about the quality of the work.
Wonderful. And then when you actually do those cases and things, as you say, get rough and either complications or things don't work out, how do you keep calm? And for example, there's a temptation, maybe people want to, scream at the team, come on guys, it's really, and try to get them to move. How can you remain calm and get it moving in the right direction?
So a couple of things I try to do for myself. So usually I will look at the cases beforehand, at least the day before, and think of a very clear path for myself. Plan ahead of my time. And I do it with the team the next day, but the day before I think about it all by myself and reflect on it. And I try and think of all the possible things that could go wrong and all the possible strategies that I may have to adopt, so that mentally I'm not thinking. I want to be there thinking on the fly to try and solve problems that may arise, but I've already thought about them ahead of time. So being prepared mentally and expecting things to happen is really helpful. Then I can come in the next morning and meet with my team, draw pictures on the board and say, guys, this is what we're going to do. These are the possibilities. Let's get this equipment in the room, and this is what we have to be concerned about. So I think that really sort of helps me prepare for it. The second thing is that, I'll tell you three things. Second thing is I am not afraid of failing. I don't have a problem with an unsuccessful procedure. Of course, nobody wants to have complications. So my fear obviously is always complications, which everybody has that fear. So what I do is, and this is a bit of philosophy and religion, I guess, coming into it, but I'm basically a religious individual. I have a lot of faith. And so I pray before every procedure. And sometime when I'm doing something particularly complex, I have a special prayer. And I will, my prayer always to God is that, I use the skill sets that you've given me. I want to use it to the best of my abilities. So help me achieve that goal. I don't have no problem if I am not good enough to not succeed, but just help me not hurt this patient. So that helps to keep my focus on the patient and not about my ego. And I think separating that helps me, because if there's something doesn't work out right, then in that case, I am able to focus on just taking care of the patient's need at that moment in time, and accepting the fact that I fail, and then stopping and knowing when to stop and knowing what your limits are, what you can and cannot do. So that's, sorry, long answer here, but that's kind of how it's a journey. It's actually the journey for every procedure that you have to go through, kind of both mentally to get the best out of it.
And then let's say that a procedure doesn't go well, there's a complication. How do you recover from that? Do you have any specific things? How do you get over what happened to move on to the next one?
So I think that starts off actually before I even do the procedure, because I don't do ad hoc CTO PCIs. And I insist that every patient who comes in for a CTO PCI who's referred to me must come and see me with the family members in clinic. And I set their expectations, I show their angiograms, I draw detailed pictures to them, I talk about the risk of perforation and all the bad things that can happen. And I always leave it to them, and I always tell the patients, don't decide now, think about it, talk to your doctors, talk to your family members, and get back to me. So by doing so, I think I'm able to create a relationship, and I spend almost an hour sometime with these patients in consultation. So I think that creates a relationship of trust with them, and a certain level of bonding. And they begin to feel, all right, this person is willing to tell us everything, and including all the potential complications. So they come in hopefully with a lot of trust. So when there is a complication, when I sit down and explain it to them, and I show them the angiograms in great detail, there is a considerably greater level of acceptance in them that, yeah, this is something we went into knowing. This was explained to us. So that's their part of it. Personally, as I mentioned, it's, if there's a death, for instance, unfortunately, I have not had anybody die on a CTO procedure, but people have complications. I've always felt it takes away a little part of you from the inside. in my 23-year career, I've probably had 12 people die on a table. And I remember every single one of them, but I don't remember all the successes that I've had. And I think that it's, again, diving into your own faith and finding whatever way you can find solace. And the other thing that I do is that I don't, the one thing that I do, I will get up and I'll start doing the procedure again. So I don't take a break and say, this complication happened, therefore I must stay away from this. It's like you fall down, you get up, you learn from what you did, and you move on. And that helps me, because then the next time around when I'm successful, it sort of reinforces my belief that, you know what, I'm good enough to do this thing. And I think having that self-belief that you can move forward from a disaster is actually really important for your growth.
And then when it comes to cases that you have done that you remember that taught you a lot, are there any specific cases that have really left a memory? And you're right, I do remember usually the bad ones more so than the good ones, but are there any cases that have specifically meant a lot to you?
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, there were two right coronary arteries that I ruptured. Both were horrible. Every case that I've had a death on was a calcified lesion. And so they were after atherectomy, after stenting and post-dilation is what ruptured the vessels. There was one particular case that I did where it was a circumflex trying to advance a guide liner to deliver a balloon or a stent. And I think what I remember is that trying to get the thing forward, the stent to go across the lesion despite a guide liner, basically the guide liner kind of almost got pushed back from the forces that I was applying and kind of avulsed the artery. Sometimes a power injection actually did that as well. One was a long case where you have this horribly calcified, very long lesion, and the slow flow just results in, ischemic myocardium and stunt. My point is that I think what I learned from these is that over the years is that while I love doing complex PCI, what I have learned is that the art of complex PCI is to take complex patients and the complex procedure and then break down the procedure into simple steps and make a complex patient a simple procedure. So be predictable. I tell my staff sometimes I'm pretty boring in the sense that they can predict what I'm going to do next because I have the same routine and the same steps and the same thought process, whether it's nighttime or daytime or morning time or 1 hour or 5 hours later. So what I've learned is to be consistent in your approach and try and simplify the procedure rather than making it very complicated.
Wonderful. And then in terms of your learning process, what did you find to be the most difficult thing to master? Was it the different equipment? Was it different thinking? What was the thing that you found the hardest to learn to do CTO and complex PCI?
Yeah, I think that learning the hybrid algorithm wasn't that difficult, but I think for me, just dealing with these tortuous calcified arteries and being able to control the entry into the true lumen, that's the hardest thing for me. Look, collaterals are there, and you can either access them or you can't access them. Straightforward lesions, most people can do, but it's those really, like the case that Bill showed yesterday with the tortuous spiral, RCAs. I think we are still that re-entry, I think, into the true channel remains the biggest challenge for me personally. Once I get there, then I know what to do. I have other tools, skill sets to do that, and the tools are obviously wonderful, but that I find is the hardest challenge for me.
Perfect. And then conversely, you've gone to many places, you've gone to Pakistan, other places, teaching people how to do this. How do you approach the teaching part? Are you see some person operate for the first time? Can you tell, are they going to be a good operator? Are they going to be able to learn it? Or it's something that you discover as things go along?
Yes, I have found, I think when somebody calls you, they have hopefully gone through a little bit of a self-reflecting journey on their own to realize that this is something that they want to do. So I found that the people who call me usually already have a certain level of interest in them. However, I think the key thing is just watching them, watching them interact with their staff and dealing with their own selves. And are they good listeners or not? They have to obviously have good hands, but I think they have to have a good ear to listen to. They have to be willing to change their habits. They have to be willing to realize that their old ways of doing things need to be modified, and that's okay. And the other thing is, how do they allow other members of their team to be a partner towards them? So that cath lab, when I go to Pakistan, for instance, it's not just about training the individual, it's about training the entire team. So while they're trying to cross a lesion, to step out away and talk with the technician and to the nurse who's circulating, right? And letting them know what exactly is it that we are doing, so that the success of the operator depends so much on the success of the quality of the team that they're with. They are the ones who need to be able to also respond to any crisis that happens in the lab. So I take it as a sort of a responsibility of training the entire team over there in Pakistan, rather than just going and teaching one operator. But I think, yeah, their personality, you can tell very early on if their personality is suited for this or not.
Perfect. And then when it comes to keeping the balance, you're very busy in many, doing complex cases in multiple areas. You see patients. How do you make everything fit into the 24-hour day?
I don't. I think that's a question for my wife, and she will tell you what the truth is. That is true. One of my greatest struggles, I think, more than CTO, PCI, has really been balancing the work and life balance. That has been enormously hard for me. And I think I'm probably struggling with it more now than ever in my career, as I actually get busier. And I have a lot of other sort of interests outside of work that I do, which are not fun, but they're just kind of service-based. So that has been a big challenge for me, and I'm not quite sure I've really mastered that yet. And it has, in all honesty, it has compromised my health as well, and it has compromised my time away from family as well. So that is definitely a part that I continue to struggle with. And I probably need more help myself in that area. And, I'm probably not, I think I'm in a good place where I can good advise to somebody what not to do based on what I have done. But I've yet to find a good solution for my own self.
Well, I think with the work you're doing outside, there's a lot of volunteering coming in, which is amazing and very rewarding. And that obviously plays an important role. How did you decide to get involved in all these extra activities that you were doing?
Yes, I'm... Again, there's coming back to the religious concept over here, but we have to think about what is the purpose in life, and I think that's what has to be sort of guides an individual, your own personal set of beliefs as to what is it that you want, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind, why did you come in this world, what are you supposed to do, and what do you want people to remember yourself by. And so, and there's no one right answer for that. Everybody has to decide on their own. So, our belief structure in Islam certainly is that the best way to serve your life here is to be of service to others. And so obviously we are already doing that in the sense that we have a certain skill set. We are well-paid professionals. We do amazing work. Everybody does, and we benefit our patients. But then what? After that, the real charm for me is actually extending that skill set into an area outside of work where there is no benefit for you, except for the fact that you are simply giving back to the community. Because we have in this community, certainly in the United States, significant gaps in healthcare access, and there's a lot of people who are uninsured. There's a lot of homelessness issues in our communities. So my wife Nahid, who's also a physician and also went back to school, gave up her pathology career and went back and did a MPH at the University of Minnesota. And certainly my daughter as well, who's also a PhD at the U in health services. We all sort of, and along with our group of friends in the community, went ahead and established a couple of nonprofits that we operate, which focus on housing for the unhoused. And then also we actually operate the only clinic in the country which is providing free care of cardiology care specifically to patients who are uninsured or who are undocumented. And we provide them with diagnostic services as well, including echo, stress testing, everything. So the concept here was simply that it's all about giving back and being able to be of value.
That's a huge task, especially given how much you're working, right? I mean, you have, again, a full regular job, so to speak. Yeah. And now you're building all this, which is fulfilling a great need and very deserved. So, even though the time can be a little tricky, I think the service and the benefit to these people, it's amazing and something to be very proud of.
It is, and I will tell you that when I have gone through the stress of work, and I think going on a weekend, this clinic is happening right now in Minneapolis as we speak, it actually brings me back to the core of medicine. Just dealing with the individuals who cannot go anywhere for their healthcare, but yet we are able to provide help for them. It really brings down the whole essence of medicine as to why we are in. Because sometimes in our work, we kind of get lost in all the other sort of a non-medical stuff that goes around us, right? And then that frustrates us. And it's almost like you go back. For me, it's almost like going back every 2 weeks to the basic core of medicine. Why exactly did I do this? And so I come back refreshed when I do that work. So it's been really fun.
And how were you able to start it? Because that in itself is maybe even more challenging than learning how to do CTO. Yeah. How did you get into all this and build up this whole organization?
Well, there are two organizations for the clinic side. So first of all, you have to know how to make a nonprofit. So I had to learn the steps of that and go to a legal firm and create bylaws and create mission, vision statements and all that stuff, and file for all our, for all the legalities that are involved in creating a nonprofit, create a board. So that part of it is something that I had to learn over time. From the clinic perspective, I would have to say that Allina Health actually was incredibly helpful for us because they actually gave us free space in their own clinic in Bandana Square. So that's where we are based out of. And then we were able to garner the support of several of our colleagues in the Allina system who helped me out. So they come and volunteer. We have an incredible group of echosonographers from United Hospital who come and help me. A couple from Mercy as well. We have some colleagues at Mercy Hospitals and non-invasive docs who come and help me as well. And then we work with the University of Minnesota students who are either in their last year or in their gap year interested in medicine, who come in and then volunteer as medical scribes. And then we help support them in their application to med school. So these guys are getting exposure to medicine while they're even thinking about going into medicine. So that's been a unique thing for them. And many of them who are not interested in medicine but just want to deep dive into languages will come and volunteer as interpreters for us. So it's taken a few years to get there, but we've been quite successful. And the other nonprofit, which is a housing profit, really came out of started off as a very small organization thinking we will just help individuals in the community who need some help, some small cash help. But that transformed during the pandemic because we then acquired a house which we operate as a transitional home for women who are basically being evicted or who are abused. And then secondly, during the pandemic, there were thousands of people who were out in encampments. So we ran a very successful program that took individuals from those encampments, housed them into hotels, and then moved them into permanent housing. So consequently, the state of Minnesota's Department of Human Services realized what we were doing because our work through social media basically spread worldwide. So we ended up getting donations from all around the world. And so now we are actually partnering with the state to provide housing for the Afghan refugees as well. So the work has, we think that homelessness doesn't exist in the United States. The reality is it's rampant. And we used to get in the past about maybe, 70, 80 applications a year. Now we get about 60 applications in 1 week whenever our portal is open for application because the pandemic has left people in a devastating situation. And so they are really financially struggling. So my wife, Nahid, does a tremendous amount of work in that. I'm not able to, I'm the president of the organization, but she's effectively the director and running the whole program herself.
Well, that's amazing. And I mean, you're absolutely right. In Minneapolis, you go to the Greenway and there are so many people who are homeless and suffering. So especially in the winter, I can see how it can be literally lethal. So that's extremely rewarding and congratulations for running all that. That's impressive.
It's been very gratifying to do that.
So clearly you have too many things going on. It probably is very little free time. But is any free time? Do you have any hobbies or other things that you like to do?
I used to be an avid sports person. I used to play a lot before. I'm an avid cricketer. I used to play soccer and squash when I was much younger. And I used to be a runner as well. But one of the struggles that I mentioned earlier of not being able to find the balance has really been this, that I've had to compromise and give up a lot of those things that I did because there just simply isn't enough time. So for me to do that, so that's my challenge over the next 5 years, is how do I try and regain some of that balance in my life and bring back the things that the extracurricular activities that I used to, that I used to really enjoy on. So right now, my biggest, thing that we do is just basically travel whenever I can with my family and my children and my wife. We like to go overseas as much as we possibly can and try and spend some time with family. But I don't. My other hobby was always reading as well, which I have not been doing as much as I would like to outside of work. So it comes at a price for sure, and you know that you travel all the time as well. But it's been a real struggle.
Well, again, it's been it's always never easy, and no one
No.
think has figured out the balance. What is the right balance about personal and professional life? But do you have any favorite books or any favorite movie?
Yeah. Well, I used to read a lot of fiction in the past. I'm now more gone into the side of reading in history, and I like to read some religious books, but I like to read books about history and social issues. So again, it helps me with the way my personality is right now and the work that I'm doing. It really helps us. And I think just my wife and I talk about this. There's a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist, for instance. Books like that, which are really critical for us to how do we create a society where our approach towards other people change? How do we bond together as human beings and break down the barriers that seem to be dividing us more than uniting us in this day and age, based on what's happening in the world right now? So my reading interests have kind of shifted more towards those areas.
That's impressive. And actually, as you said, probably not enough time to read, but I'm just curious what it takes. Let's say someone gets an application for housing. I mean, then how do you find one? I mean, there must be a lot of work there identifying the options and trying to guide them, right? I mean, how do you do all this?
So to be honest, I personally did not do that work. During the pandemic, we had a team. My daughter was leading the team with my wife, and there were about 7 volunteers. And they would spend their time during the middle of the pandemic in the hotels, because we, during the pandemic, actually sponsored about 10,000 nights in hotels in a space of 1 year. And we housed about 1,500 people. And then what they did was they would reach out during those days. We reached out to the hotels and found out, because they were obviously empty. So we put them in hotels. And during that time, our team reached out to the landlords and worked with housing navigators from the county and work with them to find permanent housing for them. Now the hotels are all occupied, obviously, and the hotel program is completely shut down. So now we are trying to primarily prevent people from getting evicted. So if somebody applies and says we need $2,000 because we are back in rent for the last 3 or 4 months, otherwise they get evicted, then we help them out and we pay their rent, or we work with other organizations and we work together with them. And so my wife again does the vast majority of this work. So there's a vetting process. We work with the social workers, and he does a lot of that interaction with them. In fact, the situation in our society is so bad that even the social workers who work for the county, they themselves are struggling. So they actually reach out to us and say, can you help us as well? Because we are just struggling so much because they barely make any money to make their ends meet. So it's really about networking, and he has done this incredible job of working with all the social workers, and she knows most of the landlords now who are into sort of affordable housing. And so it's reaching out to those affordable housing, and they've gotten to know us now. So they take our word. If we say we're going to send you a check, they believe it. So it's building those relationships. Again, it's not much different than CTO, that it's all about creating a team, building around you, but somebody has to take the central place for that.
It's also about the creativity, as you say, right? It's not the same challenges in every person. Yeah. There are some other challenges, and you have to learn all this. So the learning process, I guess, translates very well. They're doing very challenging things, and we would argue very, very meaningful things as well. How about the things that excite you right now and for the upcoming future? Are there some things that you're super excited about?
In the field of cardiology?
Cardiology and personal as well.
Well, I think in the field of cardiology, at least, I think, I also do some structural work. So I am interested very much in seeing from the structural side, for instance, how the whole field of mitral therapies evolves. And that should be really fun to watch. It won't probably happen in my career time, but certainly that's just as a profession, I'm really genuinely interested in that. From the coronary side, I think what excites me is I'm a very imaging and physiology based person, so I rely heavily on that, and I'm always looking for better tools for imaging purposes, especially. I've gotten a lot more into coronary microvascular disease and evaluation of the myocardial perfusion following PCI as well. So that's an area that's been of interest for me more recently. I think drug-coated balloons will be extremely helpful. I tend not to put second layers of stents, and I've been using DCB peripheral balloons sort of off-label for the last several years now, and I'm looking forward to the agent balloon being released as well. What excites me also is the potential for biodegradable scaffolds, and I did have some exposure with that actually before the absorbed stent was taken off the market. And I will say that, if you do it properly with OCT guidance or IVUS guidance, you can actually get really good results. And my patients, at least at that time, did really well. So I think there's a role for that as well. So I'm looking forward to some of those. And I think what excites me, is the challenge for me is really getting better at CTO PCI, because that really has been my passion, and it's something that I continue to look to grow in our practice at United Hospital. And working with some of my colleagues, Dr. Jamil and Dr. Kolbeck, are both interested in it. And so sort of expanding this from a 1-person to a 3-person team and sort of growing together makes the whole journey a lot more exciting.
Well, I mean, you clearly built a phenomenal team and a phenomenal program, and you're having some amazing results. In terms of the things that you've done, anything you would have done different from what you've done so far?
Professionally, good question. I'd never really, I guess I would have, I think I would have probably, I wish I could go back and do some more dedicated training in CTO PCI, meaning that I learned on the job, obviously, but there aren't that many opportunities for us, for instance, to take a sabbatical, for instance, and say, can I just take 3 months and work in your lab and be a fellow, right? Or wherever we can go and spend time and just learning from different operators around the world. Our work structure just doesn't give us that flexibility to do that. So that's one thing that I think from that realm I wish I had done differently. The only other thing I sometimes regret is that in my desire to achieve sort of clinical and sort of skill-based excellence, which I'm still continuing to try and do, I neglected to be in the area of publishing. And so I don't have much academic contribution towards the field of cardiology, which is something that I had always sort of desired for, but I never really got an opportunity of doing that. And part of it, of course, is just being in the right place at the right time and having the resources and time to do it. So some of those aspects were, at this stage in my career now, I kind of feel a little bit that maybe I neglected that a little bit too much and I should have done it a little bit earlier, but it gave me an opportunity, I guess, of doing other things.
Well, no one can do everything, and I mean, you have already a pretty full spectrum. I think it's pretty impressive what you've achieved. But in your mind, what are the things that you're the most proud of from everything you've done personally, professionally so far?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is that, coming from Pakistan, from a very, very humble sort of a background, extremely humble background. I grew up in very simple surroundings, and I had an incredible childhood living in with a joint family system. I remember the days when I used to walk to school, or it was about a 10-mile walk, or going on a bus for 5 years of med school. To be able to now live in the United States and being able to have a life of privilege. The biggest struggle for us has been, how do you raise your family and keep them grounded and keep them attached to the similar values, some of our cultural values and a lot of the religious values and religious identity. Because I think it's very easy in the United States to sort of, for our children who are born here, to lose what their ancestry is. And I wanted to make sure with Nahid and I wanted to make sure that we don't lose that in our children. So I think that interaction with our community here over the years is that allowed the children to remain really grounded. And I've been very involved in our community locally and in the local mosques, and and I've been an activist, and I've been sort of a I've been a member of the local Sunday school here for the last 20 years. So we sort of made the school and taught in that school. So we carried our children through that journey through not just teaching but also exposure. So I think I'm sorry for the long answer. Hopefully you'll probably edit this at some point.
This is perfect.
But it was important because I think that the children needed to now see where we come from, and they have a new American Muslim identity, but yet they are able to I understand that their roots are from one country, they belong to a different country, and how do they create that balance? And that, I think, is something that I think our children have done really very well with, and I'm particularly proud of my 3 children having achieved that. I think, the other thing that I'm particularly proud of is the fact that my wife has been an enormous support for us. All our wives, I'm sure, are. But for us, my father passed away in my own home from an intracranial bleed in 2006. My mom moved over here, and she took her into her home. And then my in-laws moved in here and lived with us as well for the last decade. So she has been the primary caregiver for them, sacrificing her sort of a career. And that has allowed me to do the work that I do. And yet now she's taking on and basically managing our 2 nonprofits with doing the 95% of the work. This is what she does. So I think that I'm especially proud of how she has been able to navigate through the challenges of being an immigrant physician and making those sacrifices and allowing others around her to thrive. And professionally, of course, I'm happy that I was able to contribute to society over here in a positive way, hopefully, and make an impact on patients, and hopefully be able to look back at my career and at some point in time and say, I did the best I could have done, and I made an effort, and I left behind something that society benefited from as well. So it's not an end point, it's really a journey. And it's not from us to judge what you've done is valuable or not. It's really for others who benefited from it. And it doesn't really matter, the accolades and the social media attention, none of that stuff matters to us. It really has to be something that is close to you, and it has to be between you and your creator. And you have to feel that your creator is somebody who feels that this individual has given up their time and effort. And at the end of the day, what matters is not what people think. What society thinks is what people who benefit from it, what they feel about you, and it's between you and your creator. So that's kind of how we've approached our life here.
Well, I mean, again, it's impressive, and I think it speaks volumes about the effort. And you're right, this is a very common concern from people that, the children, the next generation grows up in a completely different environment. Now, from Greece as well, I didn't have the resources when I was there, nothing like here. And it's always good to keep touch with our roots that, there's everything is given, but also can be taken at any time. And you have to do the best you can with whatever you have, and don't become ungrounded. So, Bilal, if you had to give any advice, so you've done so much on so many different areas. Young people who are starting now in school or fellowship or early career, and they will develop, what would you advise them?
My advice would be, I think, first of all, they have to understand who they are and what their goals are, and have a very clear vision of what is it that they're trying to be. And how do they, and by that, they have to understand what their personalities are. So understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses, understand your family support, and what can your family do as you embark on a journey of, for instance, complex PCI and CTU and become a really busy one. Is your family going to be able to withstand that? Because that puts stress on our families. There's no doubt about that, right? Sure. And do you have the ability to navigate that journey as well? But I think ultimately, what's important for them is to focus on one thing only. How do you create a work ethic that is built on humility and built on honesty and built on the right vision? And that vision has to be focused about helping the patients naturally, which is all what we try to do, but for the right reasons. And secondly, about how do you take, it's a journey where you cannot be on your own. Other people will always be there in our journey to help us where we are. So the countless number of people have helped me to get there. So therefore, it's really important for us to make sure that the people who work with us, we carry them along as well. So they have to always focus not on themselves and not to look at other people around them as facilitators for their career, but they have to be the leaders for people around them as well. Because we all live in a micro
bubble, so to speak.
Yes, we have our own environment, right? And a micro universe is what I'm trying to say. And the people around us will help us, but we have to help them as well. So understand yourself, understand your strengths and limitations, work really hard, develop a strong work ethic, and just be honest and be somebody who's full of integrity. If you have integrity, people will always come to you. That'll be the biggest magnet for anybody. They will come back to you. They will rely on you. They will seek your opinion, and they will always trust your judgment. And if you show interest in other people, people will show interest in you. And that's how I think you can make yourself successful and make others successful around you as well. And if you make others successful around you, those may be your nurses, your technicians, whoever it might be, and you have helped them achieve a better career because of what your intervention and your guidance to them was. That's another aspect of how we can help people. It's not just through the procedures that we do, but carrying other people along with us in that journey.
Well, Bilal, I think this has been an eye-opener for me. We worked for many years. I didn't even know, to be honest, many of the things that you mentioned today. So I'm really, really inspired personally. I mean, it's been an amazing journey and tremendous impact on so many people. So thank you again. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For being part of this. Thanks for all the amazing work you're doing. And, I'm sure many people will be very inspired and motivated to do similar things as well.
Oh, thank you. And I've been inspired by both you as well as, like I said earlier, the members of our CDO PCI community. And I'll never forget the first time I sat in the car with you and the cab ride coming back from Chicago and how, it was like a big deal for me that I'm sitting with Manos Brodakis. I mean, this is incredible. And I want you to know that, you're admired very much so by my colleagues in Pakistan. You've already witnessed some of that. It's your contribution towards this field has been unbelievable, and you continue to inspire so many people around the world. I can just see it when people come and throng you around in these meetings, and it's very, very heartwarming for me to see that I work with somebody and I'm friends with somebody who has made such a huge impact that you've inspired so many people around the world. Just think about the impact that you have made to other people. So I appreciate everything you've done.
Well, I think you've done much more. But again, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bilal. Thank you for listening to the Sensei podcast.